Holy background noise, Batman. We have a podcast. All right. And I am your host, Joe.
I'm Jack.
And today we are talking about two Batman comics. We're talking about Batman Long Halloween and Batman Dark Victory. But before we get into that, we have a few announcements that we need to go over. First of all, we have started doing our Background Bites episodes. Those come out on almost every Friday. There is not going to be one. There should have been one last Friday. Hope you guys enjoyed listening about Little Mermaid. We won't have one this Friday though, because we're going to be doing our monthly stuff we liked posts. That's what's going to come out this. Am I correct? Am I right on the schedule, Jack?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
This Friday we got our picks of the month.
Picks of the month. Yes, that's what I called it stuff we like. That's not what we're calling it.
Same thing.
Yeah. We're doing our monthly post of that, and then on all Mondays, on all Fridays that are not the Friday that we put out stuff we liked, picks of the month, we'll be posting those Background Bites episodes. Also, special announcement for concerning myself, we are adding another project to this background noise network of things. I am going to start streaming on Twitch. I'm going to be playing classic Pokemon games. So if you have nostalgia for old Pokemon games, you might enjoy it just because of that. We're going to start with Pokemon Yellow and just work our way through the franchise. Also, if you want to hang out with one of your favorite podcast hosts, host of your favorite podcast, not your favorite host on the podcast, obviously.
No, clearly not.
You can tune in. I will be starting this Friday at 7 p.m. My Twitch name account place is called Professor Draken, and I will post a link on Reddit, and Jack will put a link on Instagram along with our picks of the month. So you guys could be looking forward to that or not. I don't know what you guys like to watch. But in the meantime, we are talking about Batman comics, and specifically Long Halloween and Dark Victory, in preparation for the new Batman movie, The Batman, starring
Robert
Twilight
Pattinson.
Robert Pattinson, thank you. So starring Twilight Man. Because these two comics were discussed as being some of the inspiration for that movie, so we wanted to get some of the source material, as they say.
Yes.
So the premise of the two comics is, there's the famous comic Batman Year One, which is establishing Batman as a character, and as Jack pointed out to me, Long Halloween and Dark Victory are kind of like Batman's Year 2 and 3. Basically, they are the next 2 years of Batman doing Batman things. Long Halloween starts off with. It begins with there's the setup, figuring out. I think there's a wedding in the Falcone crime family, and then one of Falcone's men dies on Halloween night, and right, one of Falcone's men.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, one of his men is killed on Halloween night, and then that kicks off a year-long period of murders on holidays, and they're all murders that are targeting the Falcone crime family in some way. And so we have the struggle of, Batman, Harvey Dent, and Commissioner Gordon are trying to figure out. They're trying to bring down the Falcone crime family, but also they're trying to figure out who the quote-unquote holiday killer is, because he kills on a holiday, and he always leaves a token with the. On Halloween, he leaves a pumpkin. On Christmas, on Thanksgiving, he leaves a cornucopia. Yeah, and there's a different token to mark the holiday occasion, one for each month. And then things continue to escalate. They get to the point where they have someone in court who is going to testify on Falcone. And Harvey Dent, district attorney, he's doing the prosecuting, and then he gets acid thrown in his face. And if you know anything about Harvey Dent, you know that the acid burns don't go away, because he becomes Two-Face, because it's completely scars the one side of his face. And then he goes and he basically just completely snaps, and he kills Falcone, or the dad, the Roman is his nickname,
Yep.
uh, Falcone. He kills him on the next Halloween night. So it's been a full year from the start of these murders. So it's the long Halloween, Halloween to Halloween. Um, and he kills the dad, and the daughter like gets thrown out the window in the kerfuffle, which is relevant because then we go into Dark Victory, where um, that daughter, Sophia Falcone, takes over her father's organization, and then we see members of the police team that were responsible for taking down the Falcone family getting systematically murdered. And they're murdered, and every time they are killed, and they're murdered like once a month, basically. Or I don't think it's once a month, but
It's roughly that, yeah.
It's spaced out over a long period of time. And each time someone is killed, they use a piece of paper is pinned onto them in some manner. They are hanged. A piece of paper is taped onto them or attached to them with a hangman depiction, a half filled in hangman, the game, like the game of Hangman. And it has a bunch of coded messages. And so now we have the Hanged Man killer, or the Hangman, or whatever cute nickname they give the person. And you find out that it was all the paper are papers from Harvey Dent's files, because they're trying to they're directly undermining Harvey Dent as the DA who took down the Falcone father. And you learn that it is actually Sophia, the daughter, who took over, who has been, I don't know, framing Harvey Dent or trying to make him bad.
Yeah, so because you have Harvey killed Carmen the Roman Falcone, her dad, so she's trying to frame him and ruin his life because he basically ruined hers.
Yeah, exactly. And then during that time, Two-Face, Harvey Dent is basically gone at this point. We have Two-Face, who is he's working under the scenes, behind the scenes, with the new district attorney to pull some strings to get various things that he wants done. He's also working with all of the quote unquote freaks. So, Joker and Poison Ivy and Mr. Freeze and Solomon Grundy, and a classic rogues gallery of Batman villains. He's working with all of the quote unquote freaks to take down the rest of the Falcone crime family, the members that are remaining. And then the end of that story, the Dark Victory, is they have finished taking down the Falcone crime family, but Two-Face is probably dead, and there's been a lot of suffering dispensed by all people on all sides. So I think that's the broad overarching plot. But Jack, I think you have some interesting speculations, because we actually in Long Halloween we catch the killer, quote unquote, and the person who is revealed to be the killer is Alberto Falcone, so one of the sons, actually. And he's he takes credit for all 13. Well, he takes credit for all 12 of the murders. Obviously, Harvey Dent himself kills the Roman at the end of the Long Halloween, but Alberto takes credit for all 12. But he probably isn't responsible for most of them, as Jack will detail for us now, I believe, right?
Yep, I can do that. So there's basically a lot that is sort of thrown at you in that final issue. So at the very end, I want to say it's 13 issues. So at the end of issue 12, the big reveal is that it's Alberto who's there with the gun, and he ends up killing Sal Maroni, who's just one of, the Roman's friends. So ends up killing him, and so we automatically think he's Holiday Killer because he's the gun and all of that. And then at the end of that last issue, we have Two-Face reveal that there are actually two Holiday Killers. So that becomes a big shock. And then at the very, very end of the last issue of the story, we learn, no, there were actually three. So the three who it ends up being are Gilda, Harvey, and Alberto. And so me spending way too much time rereading the story and trying to figure out who killed what, for the first kill on Halloween, it definitely pretty certain was Gilda. Thanksgiving, same thing. Christmas, also same thing. So that would have been Johnny Vitti was the first one. Halloween, Thanksgiving was some group of gangsters. Christmas, it was Falcone's friend Milo, I believe. And then New Year's, where it gets a little tricky because that's when Alberto basically fakes his death. And what I am curious about, and I'm not sure if you guys have an opinion on this, is this when this happens, I don't know if I think this is when Harvey starts doing the killings instead of Gilda. This is when Gilda stops and Harvey basically continues where she left off. And my thought is, with this being his first time around, he sneaks onto Falcone's boat, shoots Alberto. So Alberto flees wounded. Harvey thinks he's dead, so he leaves the stuff thinking it counts as New Year's killing. And Alberto just lays low for, months. So that basically counts as his kill. Then Harvey keeps going with Valentine's Day, when he kills the gang in Sal's diner. St. Patrick's Day, it's some people in Sal's safe house, I believe, and I think that's Harvey's holiday. April Fool's, I believe that's Harvey shooting the outline of Riddler, but not actually Riddler, because nobody's actually killed for April Fool's Day, funny enough. And then, exactly. So, Mother's Day, I think that's Harvey as well, because he kills the owner of the gun store that was filing off the serial numbers for the guns. And then Father's Day, Harvey kills Sal's father, Luigi. Then Independence Day, I think, is the one I'm honestly not 100% sure about, because that's when the Gotham City coroner is killed. And I think that could be either Harvey or Alberto. I'm leaning more towards Alberto, since the coroner would have known that if a body was buried, it wasn't actually Alberto's body. He would have been able to have figured that out. So my thought is, at this point, Harvey is stopped and Alberto keeps going. And so Alberto ends up doing like the last three. So he does Alberto, then he does Carla Falcone, because she's at the coroner's office looking at Holiday, murders and all of that, and looking at their bodies. And so he probably thinks she's getting too close and kills her. And then obviously we see him kill Sal Maroni. And then Halloween, obviously we see Harvey come back and kill the Roman and Vernon, who is the guy who gave Sal the acid to pour on him in the first place. And that pretty much wraps up all the killing. So that's, reading it and rereading it, that was sort of what I pulled from it, and that's what I think makes the most sense to me. So hopefully that might have cleared up some confusion there for whoever actually read it. I don't know if you guys already came to that same conclusion or if that revealed anything else, but that was sort of what I took from it.
I'll have you know that actually opens up a lot more questions, which we're going to spend the next 30 minutes talking about.
Well, fantastic.
Well, we can, yeah. I mean,
yeah. This part being the kind of the big mystery thing, it's definitely worth thinking about. But I think you're definitely right about the last. When I say the last three, other than Carmine Falcone getting taken out, obviously by Harvey Dent. But I think the last three. Carla Falcone, the coroner, and then Sal Maroni. Definitely Alberto.
Yeah.
Because, they were related to him. Yeah, they were related to him, like, him faking his death, which makes sense. And it might have been that the one that he did was, let's see, Johnny Vitti was the bathtub guy, right?
Right. And Gilda admitted at the very end, when she's burning the hat and coat, that she did, the one she verbally admitted to were Halloween, Thanksgiving, and Christmas. And then New Year's, there's the whole thing where you see Harvey come home and she says, "Your hair's wet." And so my thought is, that's when Harvey starts, because to escape off the boat, he swims away.
Which also makes sense, because that would be his first killing,
right?
But he fails the killing, right? He doesn't know it, he actually messes up,
right?
So that makes sense. And actually that makes sense, because then Gilda would know, she knows that Harvey is doing the killings now, and is using her MO of leaving the holiday trinkets, right? And so, because she's definitely insane, right? She's that's part of this comic, that she's stable. She's insane, but she's stable. she, in her twisted mind, she's like, oh, okay, my husband is now taking care of business. I don't need to do this anymore. And
Right.
and conversely, Harvey is spiraling out of control, right? He is getting more and more crazed about solving these murders. He's getting, or not crazy per se, but he's getting more and more obsessive about it, right?
Yeah.
And so he's willing, not solving the murders, arresting the Falcone crime family.
Yeah.
He's getting more and more obsessive about it, and so he's willing to kill them when he can't catch them, basically. And also probably, I don't know if this is explicitly in the comic or not, that he's killing them to make them unstable, so that it's more likely he'll be able to catch them, because if they're on edge, they might make mistakes.
Right.
I think is probably what's going on in his head.
Yeah.
Well, it makes sense, and it works because he starts hiring the rogues, the costume freaks, and that
Right.
eventually just hastens the downfall of. I almost said hastens the downfall of the. Oh man, the Corleone family, but it's
The Falcone family.
Yeah.
Well, and then also because Alberto is he kills the coroner on Father's Day or July 4th.
It's July 4th.
July
Yep.
4th. Okay. Has Harvey
Scarecrow shoots those fireworks?
Yes. Yeah. Has Harvey become Two-Face by that point?
So that's the thing. That's why I wasn't sure, because I know by the time Harvey becomes Two-Face, he stops being Holiday, officially under the name Holiday. So that's why the coroner, it's more likely Alberto, but it still possibly could have been Harvey because he was still Harvey at that point. That was why it was iffy for me. But again, it seems more likely to point to Alberto, since his goal would be for nobody to know he's still alive.
Yeah. So it could be. Yeah. Well, actually, because Harvey's the acid happens early August, because that's Falcone the Roman's birthday.
Right.
Right.
It happens on that same day.
Happens on the same day.
That
and
was
so
that was such a good frame. That was so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was good. So it's possible that in that month, Harvey isn't obsessively killing because he's actually being a good lawyer, right? He's prepping for the case. He knows he has a case, and he doesn't need to do these extra legal activities because he's got it.
It looks like he thinks it's coming towards the end. He thinks they're about to finally, be done with this war on crime.
But Alberto knows that there's other things going on, and he needs to clear some stuff up.
Right.
So yeah, that makes sense. I like it. I think that whole that plotting of Long Halloween makes sense to me.
Sweet.
And then Dark Victory isn't nearly as complex. It's just Sophia. She like pretends to be in a wheelchair and need a head brace and stuff for the entire comic, but she's actually, well, I was going to say perfectly fine. That's not correct. She's actually healthy, physically healthy. She's still physically healthy the entire time, and is hanging people that were involved in. She is dispensing her own form of justice, which is why every hangman puzzle that she uses is like justice is blind, or an eye for an eye, or something like that. Some kind of version of that puzzle,
right?
Because she's dispensing her own form of justice on the people who were responsible for hurting her family, and doing it all using Harvey Dent's name because he's the guy who killed her father. So, yeah. I think
much less of a mystery.
Much less. Yeah.
It was still a good reveal because I didn't see it coming. Because again, the whole thing is there's so little she can do, and she needs like her bodyguard or her helper for everything. That's sort of how she comes across as. It's on to like the final issue where we see her standing up okay, and she ends up suffocating Alberto. It's like, she's more okay than she's been letting on. I wonder how long this has been the case. Oh, the entire book. Nice. Okay.
Like she actually had a moment where the Joker attacks them because at this point the entire time Two-Face has the group of the Rogues Gallery of weirdos working underneath him, right?
Right.
And so one of them is that Joker goes and attacks the Falcone home, and I think he throws Sophia down a flight of stairs out of her wheelchair or something like that.
Yeah, which is, I mean, I guess that's just her really just committing to the act, because she could have very easily have just gotten up, but she just...
he has his gun, and she has a gun that's like out of her reach. And she could crawl to it, but she'd have to use her legs. And he says, "I'll shoot you if you don't crawl and reveal that you're not actually disabled." Right. But then I think it's Alberto who comes in and he shoots the Joker.
Yeah.
And so Sophia is saved. She gets to keep her ruse, to keep it for a few more issues. So it's not as complex as Long Halloween, but it is still pretty well done, I think.
Yeah. And it's minor, but I like the whole thing that throughout it, Calendar Man's jealous that there's another calendar-based villain, and so I'm not going to say he gets his revenge, but he gets to have a bit of fun with Alberto, who claims to be Holiday, in his house by, basically pretending to be his upset dead father. And I knew there had to be fear toxin somewhere. I knew that had to be playing a part. I knew it. And so using, having them laced on his cigarettes, that made sense. It's like, there we go. Nice.
Yep. Well, anytime Scarecrow is involved, you have to assume that someone is acting erratically for a reason. Like someone is acting erratically because they have Scarecrow venom or Scarecrow toxin or whatever. Fear toxin? I can't remember what it's the specific name. Yeah. Which is a nice little touch. It's one of those things where you're like, oh, this is another little piece that you need to keep track of.
Mm-hmm.
Which we'll talk about. There's two things I want to talk about in terms of, I'll put a pin in those. There's two things I want to talk about Batman and about comic books, but I want to finish talking about these comics specifically before we do that. One of the things that I liked, I enjoyed how this story is the two stories together is about the fall of the standard criminal empire and the replacement with the freaks. Like and that phrasing, like the gangsters and the freaks or the mobsters and the freaks, is language that is used in the comics, because Sophia keeps talking about the freaks over and over again, and that's referring to Joker and Two-Face and Poison Ivy and the whole list. I list them all off again, but where we went through. So it is about, because that is in the twist in Batman, right? Because Batman starts being Batman to take down all of the normal villainous people, like normal human beings who are being normally greedy and evil and malicious and killing people because that's the way that they can get power. And it's because he takes those people down, it creates the environment where all of the absolutely insane people, who are not just greedy people, who are not just people willing to murder to get ahead, but the absolute lunatic that is the Joker, or the disgraced district attorney who has half his face melted off by acid, or the guy who is so obsessive about his wife that he keeps her locked up in an icebox so that he's looking for money to cure her, and he goes around freezing people in order to steal the money. All of those people are allowed to rise up because of Batman's actions. Because Batman is taking down the normal criminal element, all these people are able to rise up, which I think is it's interesting seeing that play out kind of in the background. That's not the main story, but it is the background story.
Right. And it's interesting too, because it's not like we get all these characters' origins. We don't get any of them. We just they suddenly start appearing, more and more of them. And it's like, well, since we have all these, gang members and crime families not in our way anymore, we really can't rise. So just like you were saying, this, including year one, this sort of trilogy of comics shows the rise and fall of crime families in Gotham, while also showing the rise for what most DC Batman fans know of as Gotham, with supervillains running amok, and if they're not running amok, they're in Arkham. So
yeah, Which is just a revolving door for crazy people, right?
Exactly.
You throw them in, and someone else comes right out at the same time.
Right.
They
He'll be
actually
back in a month.
Yep, they actually only have about 10 cells in Arkham Asylum, and so every time they get a new inmate, they have to be like, "Well, we don't have anywhere to put him. Joker hasn't been out for a while. We just leave the door open."
Listen,
Exactly.
we confiscated all this stuff. What's he gonna do? Make more?
No.
Yes. I do appreciate
Yeah.
this is a little side note. I appreciate that Joker has exactly the powers he needs to have for whatever he's going to do, because one of the things he does is he flies a plane because he's going to drop Joker the laughing gas stuff. Or no, is he just going to drop explosives?
It was
Both. I don't
Yeah, it
know.
was one or the other. I don't know what it was.
Anyway, he knows how to fly a plane because of reasons, because he's the Joker. Which is great. I love it.
Right.
That really did feel like an old school comic or Adam Westian Batman element. There's a little bit of that sprinkled in here, which makes sense as, of this. In addition to being its own story done well, it's very much almost an homage to like all the Batman stuff that came before.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And, I feel like we say that a lot with some of the stuff that we do. It's like, oh yeah, it's like that for Spider-Man, but it's like that for that. But no, it's like, there's not the like origins for most of these villains, except for Harvey Dent / Two-Face, because it's like almost very well established that, oh yeah, these guys are Batman villains. It's like, they're in the world here somewhere, them.
Yeah. And so one thing I thought was interesting, mentioning the whole thing with Joker, something, if I remember right, in the animated version they did of Long Halloween, is when he's doing that whole scene where he's flying over the city, he's reading the manual as he's flying it because he has no idea what he's doing. And so the first time he is going over the city, he presses the button to release stuff, and it's not working. So he has to go around and try look at the manual. And then he's like, oh, I have to turn this switch on first. And he's about to do it. Then Batman comes. So it's funny. It's like most of the time Joker, he knows what he wants to do, but hasn't thought everything through. So a lot of the times he does stuff on the spot just because he's insane. And so that's always fun.
It's almost like he's a dog chasing cars. He wouldn't know what to do if we caught one.
Oh,
well, more like you wouldn't want to know what he would do if he caught one.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. He has no idea how he's going to catch one, but he knows why he wants to catch one. That's probably more accurate.
There you go.
Yeah. There's other things, because I feel like one of the prominent side characters here is Selena Kyle / Catwoman, and I don't know that she necessarily is essential to the plot, but she does help move things forward at certain points, and she gives depth to Batman, right? Because the Bat and the Cat play off of each other.
Yep.
But I feel like maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe one of my fellow nerds knows better. Was Catwoman originally just a villain, and then over time became kind of an anti-hero, anti-villain? We don't know what side she's on, and moved into a hero. Historically throughout comic history.
That's honestly something I've been curious about, just reading these comics and thinking about, because I honestly don't know. I know more recently it's been something that played off of more where it's like she's more of just less a villain and more of like early, in the 60s Batman cartoon. She was pretty straight up a villain. Whereas in more recent comics, she's been played up as someone who's more of a thief or more of somebody who does stuff. Sometimes she's a good guy. I think a lot of times it just depends on who's writing her.
That's fair.
How they depict her. But when that changed from her being a villain to being somebody, that Batman is like more of a romantic interest for Batman and somebody who's less a villain and more just somebody who's looking out for themselves and Batman. I don't know when that happened or whether or not maybe even Long Halloween was one of the first times they did that. I honestly don't know, but I am curious. I didn't think to check.
The reason I ask is because she is presented from the beginning in an anti-hero kind of way. She doesn't start off as a villain and redeemed over the course. She is presented the first time she's on screen. I said on screen, on paper. The first panel she's in, she's almost like a Robin Hood kind of figure, right? She's stealing from the Falcone crime family which, you know, stealing is bad, kids. Don't do that. Do not dress up in a cat suit and run around on buildings stealing from criminals. That's also not okay. However,
Okay.
she's
Killjoy.
she's also not like being overtly evil. So which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing I think is interesting, this is part of, you know, as Batman is going forward as a character, he eventually develops an entire Bat family. So we see, as part of Dark Victory, we see the killing of the Graysons, and Dick Grayson, you know, being adopted by Batman, and then eventually becoming Robin as his partner, which I think is like, he doesn't become Robin until the last fight in the last issue of Dark Victory, if I remember correctly.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
It's like, and like the kind of the conclusion is, well, part of the conclusion is the two of them are now the dynamic duo.
Exactly, because the whole thing with Dark Victory is it's immediately after Long Halloween, and Batman, because he lost Dent, who was such a close friend, we see that friendship build and all of that. And he was somebody who, he says repeatedly, I was going to tell him who I was. I was this close to telling him my whole identity and all of that. And so for most of Dark Victory, to avoid having that sort of attachment or getting anybody hurt, somebody who's very close to Gordon, he distanced himself from. He doesn't talk to Alfred much. He doesn't even talk to Selina much. And so the whole center of the comic is Batman doesn't need to be alone, and it's important for Batman to have a Robin or somebody there for him, because him being alone is not good.
Yep. I think that's that. Unless you guys have any more thoughts about these comics specifically, that might be a good segue into some general thoughts that I have. But I want to let you guys talk if you have any more thoughts specifically about these two comics.
The only other thing I could think of off the top of my head was, while you have something like Year One is the origin of Batman, I would say something like The Long Halloween is the origin of him becoming the world's greatest detective. Because this is where he really starts to, put pieces together and solve puzzles, and really we see him lean very much into the detective side of Batman, which is so key to his character. So
something that I have thought about is I would like to see a pre-Batman story, a Bruce Wayne story about a boy who likes to solve puzzles. Right, like the kind of person who would be the world's greatest detective, but he needs the situation where he cares, basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so you're looking for a Prime original series called Wayne?
Oh, no.
Wait, yeah, kind of, I guess.
Wait, we had that. It's called Gotham seasons 3 through 7, or however many seasons that darn thing had.
Oh, that's right. That was a thing. I never watched that.
I never watched that either. Okay. So I went specifically focusing on Bruce Wayne, the problem solver. Like, I want to know why he's the kind of and I don't want to be a whole movie. I want it to be like, an episode.
Sure.
If you had an animated
I'm sure
TV,
someone's made a comic.
Probably. Maybe we'll get someone telling me about that, and they'll be like, "Why didn't you know about this thing?" I'll be like, "Because I don't know that much about comics. I'm sorry. I apologize." But that is my segue into my kind of general topic, which is because we've been talking a lot about these comics, and they are Batman comics, but we've been talking about everyone but Batman, except for right now at the end, just now. And so I want to talk about Batman in general. Like, why is Batman this archetypal, super popular character? Because if we think of the big three comic book characters are Superman, Spider-Man, and Batman. And Superman, he makes sense. He is modern Hercules, right? He's the super powerful dude who solves every problem that you could possibly solve by being super strong. Spider-Man also makes perfect sense. That's a coming of age story. It's a story about a boy becoming a man and learning that he has all kinds of weird abilities that he didn't know he had, because that's kind of like normally boys growing up, they don't learn that they can stick to the walls and like have weird spider powers that allow them to detect things before they happen. But that is part of the process of growing up, is learning all the things about yourself that you didn't understand that you
Right.
do. So those two stories make sense. Those two archetypal characters make perfect sense. So I wanted to pick your guys' brains on why you think Batman is one of these super popular archetypal characters that everyone knows.
The first thing that comes to mind for me when I think about that would be that he is human. That he doesn't have any powers or anything like that. That all of this, the whole idea behind Batman, well, I'm trying to think the best way to describe it. Because with Spider-Man, what's relatable with him is his life when he's not Spider-Man, is the things he has to balance while being Spider-Man. That's what you can relate to. His issues with money trouble or relationships, stuff like that. That's the things where you can connect with Spider-Man. Whereas with Batman, it's more like, no, we're both humans. And ideally, there's in some, like if there were some sort of scenario, this like would be possible almost because he is human. It's like all the stuff that he learned, ideally you could learn how to do. And he's, of all the characters, as much as Spider-Man is probably more relatable and Peter Parker is more relatable as a person, if something were to happen in real life, Batman seems much closer than either of the other ones. More realistic, almost.
More grounded, maybe?
More grounded. There we go. That's a good word for it.
Okay. Fair. Joseph, what are your thoughts?
I think it's because he works in black and sometimes very, very dark gray, and that's pretty cool.
Colors for the
I
win.
do think it really. Yep, exactly. Yeah. I think it really has something to do with the fact that it has to do with it, of course, being amongst DC's superpowered roster, and even kind of comic book history's all superpowered rosters, like superhero. It's literally in the name. You think they got some kind of superpower, some inhuman thing. Man's just super in the fact that he is a superhuman. He is peak intelligence, peak physical strength, and in a way that makes him like the ultimate kind of, I don't want to say wish fulfillment character, but it's like, oh yeah, he can face all these challenges, like these superpowered weirdos, because even though he's just a man, he does it through, I suppose he does it the hard way. He does it through detective work and martial arts instead of, I don't know, mind control powers or something. I suppose there's something to the simplicity of, well, ironically enough, the simplicity of Batman, even though he's a pretty complex character. It's like, how to, can you justify beating the snot out of criminal? It stops them and gets them rehabilitated or something, or is like, how far is vigilantism, yada yada, which has been explored over the whole character's history. But it's like, because like him as a character is so simple, you can go in these different things, you can explore all these different things, and it fits because Batman as a character is kind of, you can insert him into different things and it'll still fit. It can still be a Batman story. Well, think of these two. This is The Godfather, or what is it? I think the movie's called The Long Friday, which is about like a London gangster being like, it's a movie, and I don't know this off the top of my head. I'm not. It's not like, oh yes, it's a wonderful film that I've seen 12 times. No, but it's like it's about a London gangster getting kind of taken out of the criminal underworld by the IRA, and it's like, very much a parallel between the old school mobsters and the supervillains, and it's just like that fits in the world of Batman because that makes sense. It's like, oh yeah, he's this. These are both believable Batman villains because Batman is the jack of all trades and physicality and intellect and whatnot, and it makes sense that to put him in a mystery story as much as it would be to put him in something like I'm trying to think of one where I think year one was mainly him and his like training with like Ra's al Ghul and stuff.
I actually haven't read over like parts of it. I think we get like brief glimpses of him doing some training, but most of it I think it's just very early Batman, him realizing, I need to be a symbol and stuff. So like if you've watched the animated film Mask of the Phantasm, I think it's sort of that kind of vibe where it's like we get a little bit of the training, but it's more him realizing, what image am I going to be in Gotham? How am I going to strike fear into the scum and villainy in Gotham City? But I do want to read it. So.
Yeah. Especially after reading these, right? Because that's
exactly right.
It's the prequel, but it's not a prequel; it's the original, right? I think that works. Yeah, because Batman can be effortlessly inserted into a detective story. He can be He can be one of the guys. He can be the relatable character in the Justice League. Not relatable in the sense of like his motivations, but relatable as in he is a human. His limitations are human limitations. You can put him into a story where he's fighting all kinds, the rogues gallery of all kinds of weird powers. There's some DC animated movies where he teams up with Constantine to go fight like supernatural threats, which is very much not in Batman's wheelhouse, you would think, and yet he fits right in.
Like Grundy.
Yeah, sure, that's fair. But that's not one of the. I don't think that Solomon Grundy is the most well-known Batman villain. So,
fair enough.
I think that. So yeah, I think there's the relatableness of him being human in a world of gods and demons. He is just a man, and that there's something relatable in that. I don't know. I don't know
if he does just as good as them, if not better.
Yeah. Well, there's more than one plot about Batman like taking down the Justice League.
Right.
This just a man. He's quote unquote just a man. Takes down all of these superpowered beings with minimal effort. I don't know how true this is. I don't know how much of this is consistent because the tone, how dark Batman is, the tone of Batman changes from story to story. Like sometimes Adam West is very lighthearted and goofy and silly. Long Halloween: A Dark Victory is fairly dark and gritty. It's very like realistic. You are in this world where people suffer, people die, people go crazy, people get acid splashed on their face and completely lose themselves in the process.
Makes sense when you're dealing with the mob.
Yeah. Hey, but I do think there is a consistent element of, Batman is the embodiment of vengeance or justice, depending on how you're looking at it. Like Superman is truth, justice in the American way. Batman is vengeance. Batman is
night.
He is the man on the streets who believes he is fighting to make things right, and we all kind of know that we're not supposed to do that. We're not supposed to take the law into our own hands. We're not supposed to go out and fight the evils of the world by dressing up in a Halloween costume and punching people that we don't like.
Except on Halloween.
Except on Halloween, yeah. But I think that there's probably a dark part of everyone that wants to use violence and wants to justify it with justice. And I think Batman is a cathartic way of people expressing that in a healthy manner. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, it's the classic, I guess the classic beating up bullies idea, but it's taken to a kind of dark extreme.
Yes. Yeah, literally dark.
Well, I mean, I was going to say later, it's definitely dark, but yeah.
Yeah, sort of like the wish fulfillment thing you were talking about, where it's like, can't do it in real life, but seeing Batman do it, it's like, That feels pretty good.
Yeah.
Almost.
It's,
That's where you're trying to get at.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I think that kind of encompasses. Those are my thoughts. You guys, we have our we. Let me. That was a coherent statement.
Yes, yeah.
Yep, that's all, folks.
It's
Yeah, I think that all makes sense to me. I think we're all on the same page there. Then the other general thought I had, because this is our first comic book. This is the first time we've talked about comic books on background noise. So I thought we could talk about. I had some interesting thoughts about things you can do in comic books that I realized reading this that you can't do in other media. And it's the same because so I was thinking about how if you're filming a movie, if you are filming a movie, right, then you have real humans. And yes, you can do things with how you can do all kinds of cool camera tricks and you can change the lighting and you can use different set design and different costumes and things like that. But you are limited in the fact that you're using real people. Whereas if you're making something that is animated, not like a cartoon, not like in the kids' idea of what a cartoon is, but if you're making something that is done using animation,
Right.
you can use archetypal designs of things, and you can use these really exaggerated characters. So the best example of this, we haven't talked about this on the show yet, but in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, Kingpin is built like a brick wall, right? He does not have
Right.
realistic human proportions, but he is more impressive because of that.
Yep.
And I think the same thing happens in animated shows, because especially when you have a bunch of really over the top ridiculous villains, having them be more openly expressed like that, there's a lot of things you can do with that. And on top of that, the way you draw things. So you can draw things in very bright, saturated tones. You can draw things in very grim grayscale, because this entire, like, the comic pages themselves feel gritty. Not just like not the subject matter. The subject matter is also very dark and gritty, but the comic pages themselves feel very gritty and grounded and dark.
it feels like they were drawn on black paper, like sometimes.
Yeah. Yes. And I think that is something you cannot get in a book, right? If you're writing a book, it's just words on paper, right? You can do a lot of stuff with how you arrange those words, but there's still limitations there. But in a comic, there are things that you can do that you cannot do in other forms of media and entertainment. So I wanted to see what your guys' thoughts were on that.
Oh, no, absolutely. That's
I think.
Yep. No, please, Joseph, go.
Oh, that definitely brings to something I've wanted to bring up the whole time about the was it Tim Sale's character design for this whole thing. I feel like this is I feel like this is the definitive Batman look. It's like, it's perfect. It's got the people really like the long ears, and now I wasn't ever really like, and you'll look at something like kind of this same era of Batman, and they've got like comically long ears. But I feel like the ears are enough for this. And I mean, the main reason I'm bringing that up is because Tim Sale likes to use silhouettes very, very much, and that adds to that gritty feel and whatnot. So each character has, I mean, of course, this is just a general design thing anyway. Oh yeah, give the character a unique silhouette. It's like, Kingpin and whatnot. But because of that, because it's like a comic, and you're not always going to have them facing front in terms, or like facing the side, he's had to almost caricaturize the few of the things, like what was it, Ivy. You see more of her like weird vine hair than you see anything, but when you do see it, it's a kind of a stark contrast to that dark background with, I mean, she's green. She's literally green. It's kind of a big enough contrast that between, it's a deliberate choice, of course. And then there's there's Joker, who looks like a troll face with piano teeth.
His mouth is half the size of his body.
Yes. And every time he gets hit, like 5 teeth fly out. It's something. He's like a shark. It's interesting. But it's just I feel like that you just can't, even if you animate a movie of it, I feel like it's almost something that you can only accept in a comic book, if that makes any sense. Because you see the adaptation, Jack's seen the adaptation of The Long Halloween, and I've seen parts of it, and it's same DC animated style, which is fine. It's like it's got its own standards, which makes sense, but I don't feel like they would have been able to train characters in a good way. Well, mainly because it's like it's a movie, and for a movie to be effective, I suppose you have to see things, and all the heavy shadows and the gritty things of this comic wouldn't exactly translate well. But I think it's just nearly impossible to replicate something like this, which is why, and I know this is kind of leading into the other thing, but this is kind of why I think the inspiration is only going to be drawn story beat, slight character design elements. Because you look at the Catwoman suit for the Batman. It doesn't have the whiskers, but that same those kind of big eye holes in the mask, like that's been brought over, but it's very very hard to replicate that. And I think a positive, because it's kind of something.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, I agree, because one of the things I was thinking about is in a movie or in a TV show or whatever, it's constantly moving, right? Whereas in a comic book, you can have single impactful frames, right? First of all, every single frame has to be impactful, because your hand draw, probably, I don't know if you're hand drawing or computer drawing, but whatever, however you make them, only those specific frames are the ones that are getting printed. So every one of them has to land. And so you get individually impactful frames. There are a couple instances where you'll see, like Joseph, you brought up silhouettes, where you'll see two characters talking, and you'll see the silhouette of Batman in the background. Or you only see, or you see a shadow on the wall. Which in a movie, I mean, you could do that in a movie, but it's easier to miss that, and so the intended impact of that scene isn't going to land properly, because maybe you blink and you miss the one shot of him in the silhouette. But if you're reading a comic book, like, you can look at that still picture. And so I think there are things that are lost because we talked about this last week. I think we talked about taking books and adapting them, or taking stories and adapting them from one medium to another. You cannot do a direct translation, because there are things that you can do in comic books that you can only do in comic books. There are shading, and there are character designs and stylistic choices that you can only do in comic books. And so you can take that same story, that same plot line, and put that in a movie, but it will not feel the same, because the artistic medium is different.
Yep. No, something I was thinking about, which curious to hear your guys' thoughts on it. It's almost as if the medium, as it gets more visual, your brain has to do less, but you're also suspending less disbelief. So if you're watching like a live action film where they're doing all this, they spend all this money, you're not having to do much because you're seeing everything, but it's also much easier because you're not doing as much to pick out plot holes and things that are wrong. Whereas as you go down with things like an animated show or a graphic novel, you're able to suspend more disbelief, because this world doesn't look as real, and you're having to assume things more, especially with graphic novels with just still images. A lot of this stuff is playing out in your head, how they sound, how they're acting, how they're feeling, looking, whatever. And then even going down to just the base of books, everything's in your head. Just regular books where it's just written down, everything's there. And so, especially on the first run, you're not I mean, sometimes you can be if it's a really bad book, but most of the time you're just trying to play out the story in your head because that's where your characters are. And so that's something I've noticed with media is just depending on what it is and depending on how much work you have to do, that's also going to incorporate how much you're willing to let them get away with. Like that's what came to mind when I thought of Joseph mentioned the caricatures. So like you can get away with that in an animated film, depending on the animation. Anime, you can get away with it. Regular animation, probably not. And live action, there's no way. But in these comics, it works very well for the art style and the story they're telling. And so I do think it's interesting how each medium has its advantages and how each one can be used to do different things. And again, how many superhero stories and stuff, comic books and graphic novels can get away with, and how many authors and artists are able to do these unique designs. And there's so many different designs for so many different characters and so many different stories that people can tell and that have been told. And for years now, I think Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale are actually probably my favorite writer artist team, just because, and I don't know if I'm using the right terminology for it, the way they write, it always just has this mid 20th century feel to it. It doesn't feel new. It feels very old, very almost classic, just the way it's written, the way it's drawn. One of my favorite stories they also did, because Long Halloween is probably my favorite Batman story, but my favorite Spider-Man story that I can think of is Spider-Man Blue, which is one they did, which something they're also good with. It might be related, might not be, but along with just having a classic feel to their comics, they also like telling stories about characters looking back. So Spider-Man Blue is about Peter looking back on his time when he knew Gwen Stacy before she died. And so that's a very interesting story. And so, yeah, I love that whole style. And it's just interesting seeing just that. I mean, that's just one take on Batman, one take on Spider-Man. And so that's what's so cool about comics to me, is just the different stories and the way they can look and how one author can tell a story, but if he has a different artist, it just gives a completely different feel. So
Yeah.
It's interesting how many different routes you can take with your comics. So it's pretty cool for those who don't know a lot about comics and just, thought about them. There's a lot out there. And if you don't like one comic, doesn't mean you won't like them all. It just means you might not either like that artist or like that writer or something like that. But usually it does not mean you don't like the character, because there are so many different interpretations of each character in comics.
Yeah, so if you read a comic book and you don't like it, that would be like watching a movie and saying, movies are stupid.
Yep,
Like,
exactly.
You watch a bad movie and you think, oh, movies are stupid. No. You need to watch some good movies and you need to read some good comic books.
Right.
And if you're looking for some recommendations, Long Halloween and Dark Victory, some Batman and Batman Year One, probably, if you want to get the full story.
Right.
Would be some excellent recommendations there.
Yes, sir.
Well, gentlemen, any other final thoughts on either of these comic books or comic books in general or Batman in general?
No, other than, we got the new film coming out
Yep.
this Thursday, or maybe it's earlier, I don't know. But that's coming out, so I'm just hoping for even if it's not a Batman we're necessarily familiar with, I hope it is a good interpretation that's at least faithful to the core of his character. And I hope we get some fun villains too.
Oh yeah. I was just going to say, bar's low enough. I just don't want to regret buying popcorn for it. That's literally all.
That's as long as the bar is on the floor. Don't make me regret buying popcorn. You heard it here first, folks.
I don't mind. I don't think a lot of people do seem to like. What is it? I almost said Origami Killer Riddler. What is it? Unabomber Riddler or whatever. It's like that should be interesting to see. The Riddler doesn't get a lot of love in modern Batman stuff. He's either too serious or he's a joke. So I'm hoping, I don't know, hoping they do that well. And just
No,
one
Joseph,
more
he's not a joke.
related thing.
He's a riddle.
He's Enigma.
Yes, he is, because he's Edward Nygma. It's true.
His name is literally Edward Nygma. All right, I think that's enough of that.
No,
Yep,
That's
same.
we're
Done.
That is quite enough of that.
I'm about to come
Well,
to the 10-person wing in Arkham Asylum.
oh, great.
Get Clayface out of
no-
there. He served his time.
Yep. Well, this has been the Background Noise Podcast. If you've been listening thus far, we appreciate it. And if you haven't, hey, you haven't missed all them much. We are looking forward. I'm looking forward to the Batman movie.
Yep, I am.
We'll be bringing that to you guys next week. Until then, bye.